our own soft-spoken Professor Azuka Syriakos Opara. You are welcome, sir. Please, you can start your slide, okay? The slides are showing. Thank you very much. I'll enjoin us to please listen carefully so that we can all take it in and then be prepared to put in our questions in the chat box. And when we finish, if there are others that wants to ask their questions directly, we'll also be taking that. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. We have had a good session in the morning, and we want to wrap it up in this afternoon session. The way this program is designed is that these first two sessions will give us good background overview on research methodology to enable us to be able to conduct research, to have an inquisitive mind in our various practice settings, and also to be able to communicate our findings in a scientific manner, either by way of official communication to management or you're writing a manuscript. And of course, if you have that approach of manuscript writing, it covers all other aspects of scientific communication. So the last two sessions will be like case studies where we take specific examples on how to conduct. Maybe we take some specific topics or titles or project areas and see how we go about data collection and data management, as well as reporting the findings. So this session 2 will be talking about research methods and manuscript writing. And research methods has two components. The first component is data collection. How do you collect your data? The second component is data analysis. Recall in the first session of the lecture, where Professor Rudy talked about the objectives after you've done your literature review. Now, having determined the objectives, the next thing to do is the methods. So how do we address these objectives? And that's basically what the method section deals with. Under this section, we'll be looking at design. Abubakar is raising hand. Yeah, what's the matter? Abubakar, yes, you're raising your hand. Yes. Any problem? Yeah.
Dr. Bello, can you unmute him so that we hear what? Is this something that is so urgent? If not, we can wait.
Yeah, what's it?
Prof, you can continue, sir.
Okay, maybe, okay, it was an
if it's about a
accidental
question,
discharge.
Please let us keep it to ask later.
Okay. Maybe we should just keep to the protocol for the lectures. Let's reserve our lectures and comments till the end so that we don't have interruptions. So under this specifically, we'll be looking at design, what we mean by design of a study. That's actually the first thing we talk about under methods. Then the setting, the population, and sample. Under here, we'll be looking at what we really mean by the population and what we mean by sample, and how do we sample. So we also look at different techniques of sampling that can validate your study. Then inclusion and exclusion criteria, we try to illustrate that. And then we look at data collection instruments and maybe administration. And finally, we look at data analysis before we move into the next segment on manuscript writing. Now, you have to focus on something. All through any research activity, you have to focus on what? The objectives of the study. That will guide you. On the first segment of the lectures presented today, Objectives of the study will guide your literature review. And objectives of the study will also guide your methods. And you recall that Professor Ru did say that the objectives should be clear, they should be specific, and they should be measurable. So what do we really take from this? First of all, you have to define what you want to measure. That's why we say it is measurable. What actually do you want to measure? Now, research is all about measurement. There must be something. When you say you're doing research, actually there's something you want to measure through data collection and data analysis. So first thing to do is to identify it. Define what you want to measure. In terms of outcomes, I think that is the easiest way. What outcomes are you really looking at? Maybe blood pressure or fasting blood sugar or drug therapy problems, adherence, quality of life, knowledge, attitudes, satisfaction, cost, etc. So these can be the specific parameters that you may want to measure. So you have to clearly identify them. And of course, these parameters will fall into clinical outcomes or economic outcomes or humanistic outcomes, as we will say in pharmaceutical care, which is also the same thing we say in any outcome research. Your kind of research, operational research, is actually research because you are looking at definite outcome, which you can improve the system or use to improve the patient care process. So you have to clearly identify the outcomes or the parameters that you want to measure. That's the guiding principle under the objectives. Now, study design. We have identified different types of study design. The first one is called observational study, also called descriptive or analytical study. Now, when you say observational study, what it actually means is that you just observe and record. You don't influence the outcome. For instance, if we are looking at the effect of a particular antihypertensive medication on the blood pressure control, you're simply looking at the patients who have been treated without medication and then looking at the blood pressure. Nothing else is done. Or you want to get patient satisfaction with pharmaceutical services in a hospital. You simply take a cross-section of patients at a particular point in time and assess their satisfaction with the service you render in your facility without making any effort to improve on the satisfaction. That is observation. Now, it can also be cross-sectional. A cross-sectional study is a point prevalent study, or a cohort or longitudinal study. Cross-sectional study means that you collected your data once from the participants. So you had only one contact with this, and you collected your data at that particular point in time. When you say longitudinal, it means that you had repeated contact. Maybe where we one case may be. That is why police to follow up. Then we also have another study design called intervention study.
Prof, we can't hear you again, sir. Hello, sir.
I think he has network issue. And he's not aware. Maybe somebody should call him.
Hello. I'm calling him.
Hello? Okay.
Hello, sir. We are not hearing you again.
You are not hearing me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. From that experimental intervention studies, we are not hearing you. Okay, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes. Can you hear me?
No, at all.
You can't hear me at all.
Yes, sir.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay, I think you are coming on now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming now.
Don't try. Most of the studies are intervention. So this part of the observation try the problem. But having done that, you don't identify the problem. What is the solution? What, because the whole sense of pharmacy research improve patient care outcome. And how do you do that? By making intervention, maybe educational intervention, maybe you're bringing some features or some protocols that can enable the people live better. I hope you're getting me now.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, though it's cracking, but we can hear you, but it's still cracking. Sir, can you log out and log in back, sir? Maybe it will be clearer. Yes, okay. It's cracking, sir.
Okay. Can you hear me better now? Is it okay better now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Try
sir.
it.
But your screen.
I know.
Yeah, but it's better. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
So I can now, yeah. Right. So I was trying to say that in the hospital setting, the kind of practice research we want you to conduct will be intervention studies. Intervention, in the sense that we are not just interested in identifying problems only, but we want to find solution to the problem. So if, for instance, you do a prescription pattern study and find out that there is a problem with the prescription pattern, you don't just stop there. You have to take a second phase of doing an intervention and then evaluating the impact of the intervention to see how it has improved the practice. If, for instance, you carried out a study on adherence and you find that most of the patients who visit the facility are non-adherent to their medications, fine. You may also be able to explore the reasons why they are not adhering. After that, you now need to make some intervention to correct the practice. And when you do that, you also need to evaluate the outcome of the intervention that you have instituted. Has adherence now improved? Has the prescription pattern now improved? That's the kind of thing we are talking about when we say intervention studies. Also, in terms of timing, studies may be described as being prospective. That is, if they look forward, or they can be described as being retrospective if they look backwards. In this case, you are looking at historical data in the facility. So if you look at this summary, we say it can be observational, no influence. You don't influence the system. You just observe things the way they are and report. Intervention is when you make effort to influence the outcome. We say you can also describe the study as being cross-sectional, where you have single contact with the subjects, or longitudinal, where there is a follow-up. You can also describe a study as being retrospective, where it looks backwards, or prospective, where it looks forward. You can also have a combination of these. So the study may be designed in such a way that an arm of it, or a component of it may be observational. A component may be intervention, then cross-sectional or longitudinal, retrospective and prospective. Now, if you look at this, you can see that we can begin to pair them, observational and interventional. One looks like the opposite of the other, so you can pick that. You can also describe in terms of being cross-sectional or longitudinal, so you can also pair those two. In terms of time, compare retrospective and prospective. So actually, to make it clearer, you can describe your study design as observational or intervention. You can also describe it as being cross-sectional or longitudinal. You can also describe it as being retrospective or prospective. Then you can have a combination. Nothing says that one component of the study may not be observational and another one intervention. Like I said, if we are looking at adherence, yes, you can study adherence using a cross-sectional study. But you can also decide to, after you have studied the adherence and seen the factors responsible for adherence, decide to make an intervention. And after a period of time, you now repeat the study to see whether the adherence pattern has changed or not. Now, setting, that is where you'll be collecting your data. And in the hospital, the setting can be the ward. It can be in an outpatient department, inpatient pharmacy, outpatient pharmacy, or medical records department. So these are some of the places within the hospital setting that you can be carrying out your research. And I tell you, if, for instance, you have barriers with going to the ward, there are still many things you can do, carry on a study in the pharmacy department, inpatient pharmacy, outpatient pharmacy, or outpatient department, or in the medical record. And of course, the patients in the ward, their cases end up in the medical records department. Also, the cases in the ward, their prescriptions end up in the inpatient pharmacy. So there are really some things you can do, even when you have limited access to the ward. But you can start from somewhere. Then, as you go on with the study, you might be able to reach out to more places or more settings where you can collect your data. But the important thing is to be clear in your mind as to the data you want to collect and where you can collect it. Now, unit of data collection, you must ask yourself a question. What am I collecting data on? And of course, you will need many of them for your data to make sense, I suppose. In other words, ask yourself, what am I collecting my data on? Or, I mean, who or what, as the case may be. Is it on patients? Why I say that you will need many of them. If you've identified that we are going to collect data on patients, of course, it won't be one person because you are going to be collecting data, not the two. That's in the plural sense. That is why I say that you will need many of them. Is it patients? What kind of patients? Outpatients, inpatients, hypertensive patients, diabetic patients, and so on and so forth. Or doctors, you are collecting your data from doctors or from nurses, or you're collecting from prescription sheets or case notes or the folder. So it has to be clear to you. Yes, I want to go and do research. I want to collect data. Ask yourself, what is the unit of data collection? That has to be clearly defined and understood by you, the researcher. Now, population and sample. We define population as all elements in the set, or what they call universal set. And the population may be finite or defined. For instance, if we say registered pharmacists in Nigeria, you can get a record. You can get a list of registered pharmacists in Nigeria, so it's defined, we can know them. The population may also be infinite or not defined. Example, hypertensive patients. So if you are carrying out a study on hypertensive patients, you go to a hospital and check patients whose prescription bear antihypertensive medications, or those who are diagnosed to be hypertensive. They don't represent all patients who have hypertension, even in the city. Because, I mean, some people have hypertension, they don't know they have hypertension. Some have hypertension, they visit private hospitals. Some don't even visit. Some visit maybe alternative care providers. So the population in this case is not defined, and we say it is infinite. But usually, when you're carrying out the study, you look at a convenient sample, what you can reach. If you are looking at hypertensive patients, that visit a hospital, it will likely be a consecutive sampling or convenience, maybe the people you see on the days you visit the facility. It's possible that they have clinic days. So even when you go to the clinic on those clinic days, it's not all of them that visit the clinic on those days. Now the sample is representative of the population or a subset of the population. Now you ask yourself, sometimes it may be impossible or wasteful to study the entire population. You may not even know the entire population. Even if you know the entire population, do you have all the time? Do you have all the money? Do you have all the resources needed to study the entire population? So you may want to study a sample and use the sample to predict what happens in a population. Let me take it home a little bit further. If you are looking at prescription pattern in a hospital, you go to the medical records and see prescriptions over a period of 10 years. And you might see over 20,000 prescriptions. Then you start going through the 20,000 prescriptions and evaluating them. I mean, at the end of the day, you will be sweating to do this. It means the person doesn't understand how science works. But the scientists will say, okay, out of these 20,000, what sample can I use that can predict what happens in the 20,000? You might end up not using more than 2,000 to 5,000 of the prescriptions in the study. So that is what sample does for us. We sample to make inference about a population. So if we sample 2,000 prescriptions, whatever we get, we use it to make prediction about what happens in the 20,000 prescriptions, which means out of the 20,000, we have sampled 2,000, we have another 18,000 that we did not sample. And we are saying that these 2,000 will represent the other 18,000 that we did not sample. Now, for your sample to be representative of a population, it will depend on sampling method. The sampling method may be in such a way that it introduces bias. If we want to sample 20,000 prescriptions over a period of 10 years, and we just look at 1 year contains 2,000 prescriptions. We take the 2,000 prescriptions and study them. And then we are saying that these prescriptions represent the prescriptions over the past 10 years. I mean, that's not logical. That's not logical. Another factor of the sample that affects the result is the sample size. The sample size has to be adequate. It has to be adequate. What do we mean by this? There is a minimum sample size that can represent a particular population. After all, what they do in politics, the number of reps will depend on the population of a particular place or the number of constituencies in a particular place. That's the meaning of representation. And another factor there is response. Yes, you're taking a sample to make prediction about a population. If the sample you're taking does not respond to your study, will you now say that the sample is representing a population? No. It's only when they respond that you can translate your finding to what happens to the population. So these three key things about sample to make it representative of a population. One, the method of sampling. Two, the sample size. There's a minimum number for it to be adequate. And then three, the response, of the sample. And that's an illustration there you have the population, and you have the sample. And if you look at this sample, they look like the population. The sample you're seeing here should have characteristics of the population. If the sample doesn't have characteristics of the population, then you cannot say that the sample is representing the population. So that is it. Now, inclusion and exclusion criteria. Yes, after we have determined what to sample, of course, we know that we cannot sample, have our inclusion and exclusion criteria. Inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria simply refer to characteristics of the subjects that make them eligible. If the characteristics make them eligible or ineligible for the study, those characteristics that make them eligible are inclusion criteria. And the characteristics that make them ineligible will become the exclusion criteria. For instance, if we want to study adherence of hypertensive patients, the study is on assessing adherence of hypertensive patients to be approved. Because maybe you feel that this on is adherence, then the person must be consenting, literate, maybe the instrument you're using requires ability to read and write. Then you say maybe those whose duration of illness is 6 months and above. Those whose hypertension who have, and then you include both males and females. Then the exclusion criteria may be those who are below 18 years, those who have other chronic diseases, those who are not consenting, those who did not go to school, those whose duration of disease is below 6 months, and then pregnant. Now, if you look at this, all these people, both inclusion and exclusion, they are all hypertensive patients. But we have had hypertensive patient who is below 18 years. We say we cannot include. Or hypertensive patient who said, I don't want to be part of this, your study, you don't include. So you have to clearly define your inclusion criteria and the exclusion criteria at the beginning of the study. So this is just an illustration. Now, types of sampling. We have said that your method of sampling will affect how the sample can represent a population. That the method of sampling can affect how the result you get from a sample can be extrapolated to explain what happens to a population. So we have two methods, two main sampling methods, probability and non-probability. Now, when you say probability, probability simply means that you know the chance of inclusion of that sample or the element or that unit. The probability of inclusion is known. For instance, if we are sampling from 100 and we take 1 out of 100, so the probability is known, it is 1 out of 100. And if we take 50 out of 100, the probability is 50 out of 100, which is half. So the probability is known. That's what we mean by probability sampling method, or the chance of inclusion is known. A non-probability method is where this system, you don't know the chance of including any of the elements. So it's not based on probability theory. So just note two sampling methods or techniques: probability and non-probability. So we go further to look at them. Probability sampling methods. We call it random. Now let me explain this. When we say random sampling is the same thing as probability sampling. And many of us, when we say the meaning of random in statistics is different from random in everyday usage. In everyday usage, if we say random, pick people at random means you say haphazard, like some will say anyhow, pick anyone. But that is not the meaning of random in statistics. Random is actually the most scientific method of sampling because the probability of inclusion is known. So these are some examples of probability or random sampling methods. Simple random sample or sampling method. Simple, like what we do if you toss a coin, head or tail, that's simple. Or you pick from a ballot, that's simple. And so, like in this class now, we have 56 participants. If we want to choose one out of 56, or we want to say we have a prize of $2,000, we want to give it to a participant to this program, how do we select who to give it to? Several options will come to our mind. Some will say, okay, do we give it to the chairman of AHAPN, or do we give it to the moderator, or do we give it to the first person to sign in and things like that? So if you want to give it to the chairman, there's bias because the chairman, we already know who the chairman is. If you want to give it to the first person, there's also bias. So the best way to do it is, we say we are 56. So can we list all the 56 people and let one neutral person choose? That is simple. Now, when you do this, your probability of being selected is 1 out of 56. And if in the course of listing the members of the class, somebody's name appears twice, that means the person whose name appears twice has 2 times the chance of being selected than the other people. And if in the course of doing the process, somebody's name was omitted, the person can sue that if the name was included, maybe he or she would have won it. See, everybody must be included. Everybody must have an equal chance of being selected. In this case, by having the list of all the members of the class, we have included all. By writing the name of each member of the class once, we have given everybody an equal chance of being selected. And if you sample or sampling. Now, systematic sampling is where you have to follow a pattern. Maybe you say the 5th or the 10th, or what they call the nth person. So every 5 you pick one, every 10 you pick one. And so if you're going to pick every 5 out of say 100, where do you start from? That could be a problem. You can also use a random process to determine where to start from. Because if you say start from 1, that means you have already determined the people to be picked. It will be 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. But if you use a random process to determine where to start from, maybe you put all the 1 to 100 and say pick. The first one to be picked is where we start from. And that process of picking that first one is by chance. So you pick somebody, gives hand, and picks 25, then the others will follow 25, 30, and so on. Stratified. In stratified, stratification simply means you group. You can group them into male and female. You can group them into income level. You can group them into whatever criteria that distinguishes the members of the group. So grouping or strata. Then cluster. Then again, cluster is similar to stratified. You're also taking it in groups, but this group is maybe by geographical location where you take clusters. For instance, Nigeria, we can say 6 geopolitical zones. So you divide Nigeria into 6 geopolitical zones. So you cluster them into 6. And from each geopolitical zone, you can pick a state. And then from each state, you can pick a local government. And from each local government, you can pick a ward. And this one now, we are not talking about multi-stage. Now, non-probability sampling methods. Convenience. Convenience is ease of access. Like I said earlier, if you want to study hypertensive patients that visit a hospital, you go to the clinic there, and as they come, you take them. That is consecutive. Consecutive means as they come. It is also convenience in the sense that you do not have a list of all the hypertensive patients, but what you simply have is those who are attending on that particular day. So it's convenience to you. We call it convenience sampling, the ones you can access. Purposive sample is judgmental. You say you choose the judgment of the researcher. Let me give you a typical example. If we want to study Nigerian pharmacies, we can say we go and study pharmacies in Lagos, and somebody will say, but you did this study in Lagos, pharmacists in Lagos. How are you saying this is Nigeria? Because in your judgment, you know that Lagos is cosmopolitan. That when you get to Lagos, you have pharmacists from all over the country. But if I do the same study in Benin, I will not be having that judgment that Benin City will represent pharmacists in Nigeria. So based on the judgment of the researcher. And quota sampling. Yes, quota again, somehow the judgment of the researcher is needed. You say maybe, you see, you have male and female, okay? Males are, say 70%, females 30%. And when you're sampling, you can decide to say, okay, since they are not of the same size in terms of population, can we give 70% of the of what we sample, of the sample size to males and 30% to females, instead of sampling them equally? And snowball sampling, they call it friend of friend. It's just like walking backwards. Yes, you maybe usually in case of rare diseases, you get somebody who has had it, say, do you know any other person who has this? And that person will refer you to the next person. Yes, I have a friend, or I know someone who had a similar problem. So from that reference, you know, you keep walking backwards, snowballing, as the case may be. Now, sample size determination. What is the essence? You have to know that when we talk about sample size in research, it simply tells you the minimum number. And if you determine your sample size to be 100, what it means is that the minimum number for the result you are looking for should be 100. And when you determine sample size, you must add an average to take care of attrition. So if your calculated sample size is 100 patients, for instance, and you're carrying out the study, you don't use 100 patients. Maybe you look at attrition rate or response rate. You can maybe say, let's do 110 or 120, so that at the end of the day, you have a minimum of 100. It can be more, but sample size tells you the minimum number you need for the study. It can be more, but it cannot be less, because if you have calculated your sample size to be 100, and at the end of the day, you have 80, you have 80 patients, and now you're writing that there was a high dropout, that 20 dropped out, and now you are reporting based on 80. That means you're already telling us that the results of your work is not valid, because you've already at the beginning calculated sample size to be 100, and now you're reporting 80 at the end and saying that 20 people dropped out. So that's not scientific. When you calculate sample size to be 100, you can work with 150, so that if they keep dropping, you must still have minimum of 100 at the end. Now, there are ways of determining sample size. We have the formula, and the simplest way is you have what the online sample size calculator. Most of these things cannot be done online. Go online, sample size calculator, you put in some parameters, it will tell you the sample size you need for the work. But you should also note that when the population is small and known, use it as sample. For instance, maybe you have you want to look at drug use evaluation in management of cancer. And in the hospital for a period of 5 years, they have had 100 cancer patients. And you say you're calculating sample size. Well, you don't need to. 100 is something you can manage. So you can as well, evaluate the entire 100. Use the population as your sample. So this is an equation that can enable you to calculate sample size. The equation is there. All you just need to do is to plug in the values. This is for sample size for an infinite population, where the population is greater than 50,000. And you also, you can always plug in the values and compute. And this is sample size for finite, where the population is less than 50,000. You modify the formula a little bit. Like I said, you can easily do this. This sample size calculator online. You have the margin of error, you have the confidence interval, response distribution, assume this is the population, a soft online formula. You just can check out this. It gives you the sample size. So if you plug in these values and calculate a sample size of 385, you're not going to start recruiting 385. You need more than 385, maybe 10, 20% average, so that at the end of the day, you have a minimum of 385. I hope the idea of sample size determination, we have to understand it, that why do we determine sample size? Because sample size affects ability of a sample to predict a population. If you want a sample to give you an idea or to predict what happens in a population, for it to have a predictive value, then it has to be a representative of the population. And the closer the sample size is to the population, the more it can represent it. So, that's a simple logic. ideally, if you want to study a system, it's best to study all. But we know in certain circumstances, it might not be possible for you to study all. So you take a sample to predict a population. And there are cases where you must actually use the entire population. We call it census. When we are doing population census, you count everybody. You don't say, let's just estimate. Let's take a sample and use it to predict the population of a country. Also, in universal suffrage, when we are voting universal suffrage, those who are 18 years and above, everybody is eligible to vote. You don't say, Nigeria is maybe 70 million adults. Why do we need to worry about 70 million people voting? Can't we take a sample? No. Universal suffrage, everybody votes. So you don't take a sample. So these are instances where a sample, you don't need to take a sample from a population. I've also said that when the population size is small and you can access it, you don't need to start sampling. You simply use the entire population to carry out your study. Now, data collection instruments. Research is all about measurement. Identify what you want to measure and how. What tells you the parameters or the outcomes of the specific objectives. The how will tell you about the instrument or tool to use to gather data. Now, the instrument for data collection must be valid. Validity means that instrument measures what is intended to measure. For instance, a blood pressure apparatus will measure blood pressure. A thermometer will measure temperature. So in the same way, if you're carrying out certain research, the instrument you're using for your data collection must be applicable, must be an instrument that is known to assess that very parameter you want to assess. I see some people, maybe they want to study prescription pattern in a hospital, and you see them, they are constructing questionnaire and giving people questionnaire to fill. Questionnaire cannot give you prescription pattern. It's not a valid method. The valid method for you to access prescription pattern is to get the prescriptions, the actual prescriptions, and then you can use the standards to evaluate them. The instrument must also be reliable. That is, the results you get from the instrument must be reproducible. If the results are not reproducible, then there is no scientific. Science talks about reproducibility. If you do it today, you do it tomorrow, you do it in 5 years' time, you get comparable results. They don't have to be the same, but they should be comparable. Now, the data collection instruments, of course, that would depend on your method. If the method of data collection is observation, I said you apply a data collection format, which is like a checklist to extract the data. And actually, yes, most of the studies will be carried out in the hospital. You have to use a kind of data collection format. So if you are looking at prescription study over a period of time, you are going to see several prescriptions. So the question is, what data in these prescriptions are you going to extract? If you don't have a data collection format that says for patient A, you must collect the age, the sex, maybe the diagnosis, the drug, and so on. So you won't be able to analyze, you won't be able to compare the data you are collecting. So you must have a uniform format that says for each prescription, these are the parameters I'll be collecting data on. That's what we mean by a data collection format or a checklist that will guide you as to what to extract. In some of the studies, we can also use questionnaire. There are two sections of a questionnaire. One section tells us about the demographics or the demographic characteristics, like the age, the sex, and so on. You may also have clinical characteristics. Then you have the item stems and response scale. The item stems are the questions, and the response scale will tell you about how do you want them to answer the questions. Would they be saying yes or no? Will they be choosing options? Will it be strongly agree, agree, not sure, disagree, strongly disagree? That's what we mean by the response scale. Now, the questionnaire we can use for a study may be a standard questionnaire, which you can get from literature. And here we are saying it may be prefaced for local content. Yes, what do we mean by prefacing? Now, the questionnaire you are using is likely going to be one that maybe was developed for use in an advanced country.
Hello, Prof. We can't hear you. Prof is coming back again. He said he wants to work on his network. So please, let's be patient.
Okay, noted.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, he said any moment from now, he will come back in.
Okay, noted.
Hello, all. Prof said I should tell you that you should please bear with him, that he's trying to reconnect using another network. Thank you. Dr. Amibo, National Chair.
Prof is back.
Okay, Prof is back.
Yes, sir. So, Prof, you can go ahead. Unmute yourself and continue, sir.
Sorry about that's it. This online cannot replace face-to-face. The here always has issues. So we keep having different backups. I'm sorry about the interruption.
Okay, sir. We are welcome, sir.
Yes. Is that where we were? Yes. That's the last slide. So we continue from here. Now you can get a standard questionnaire from the literature. And I say you can preface it. And I was trying to explain the meaning of prefacing. Prefacing, because if you take a questionnaire that is developed for maybe use in the US or UK, there are some terms that they use, which we don't use those terms here. For instance, if they say junk food, we don't call them junk food here. Maybe we say snacks. So instead of saying, if the original questioner says junk food, you say in brackets snacks, so that the people here who are responding to it will understand what you mean. That is what I mean by prefacing of a questionnaire. You can also modify an existing standard questionnaire. And when you modify a questionnaire, you have to recheck it for validity. Because the developers of every questionnaire will test for validity. And so if you make some modifications, you have to recheck that the questionnaire is still testing what it was originally intended to test. Now, the third way of getting the questionnaire is the one that is developed by an experienced researcher or researchers. This requires a lot of knowledge and skill. It's not everybody that knows how to develop questionnaire. And questionnaire is not all about asking questions. You have a systematic way of developing a questionnaire and validating it. Another method of data collection or the instrument we can use is a quest interview, which is one-on-one, you know. And for you to conduct an interview as a way of data gathering, you should have some set of questions. So let there be some standard questions that we'll be asking from one participant to the other for consistency. Then we can also do a focus group. Focus groups usually are made up of 8 to 12 participants who try to expose a theme, and you usually have a moderator. In some instances, there may be 2 moderators. One moderator will be focusing on ensuring that you cover the themes, all the themes to be discussed. Maybe another moderator will be looking at maybe the timing, you know, to ensure that you stick within the time boundaries, as the case be, like a kind of timekeeper. Now, we also have to know the scales of data measurements. The scales of data measurement, each data you collect when you're carrying out a study, should ask yourself what scale this data we have collected. We have 4 scales of data measurement, or 4 levels of data measurement. We have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, from the lowest to the highest. Nominal is qualitative, and we normally use non-parametric statistics when we're analyzing them. Nominal data are categorical data. They simply give you attributes. They don't tell you the direction or quantity. Male, female, which one is bigger? We don't know. Black, blue, white, which one is bigger? We don't know. But just to categorize them. Ordinal is qualitative also. Ranking. This is better than that. This drug is more potent than drug B. You don't know by how much, but all you know is that in terms of potency, one is higher than the other. So again, this is ranking. The third level is an interval, which is quantitative. Again, this is, because it's quantitative, we use parametric statistics in the analysis. Here you have a constant interval, but no absolute zero starting point. I have given an example. If you have 30 degrees centigrade and 60 degrees centigrade, 30 degrees is not half of 60 degrees. So, 30 degrees is not half of 60 degrees if you are looking at how hot the two systems are. Also, you can be collecting data where the respondents are saying strongly agree, maybe on a scale of 5, agree 4, not sure 3, disagree 2, and strongly disagree 1. Again, this is interval. If you can collect data in this format, you can do quantitative statistical analysis, and that's the beauty of it. instead of saying yes or no. Yes or no, or agree or disagree, extremes. When you're checking attitude or opinion, rather than just classifying people into two extremes, it's better you grade them, whether the extent of agreement instead of agree or disagree. Now, the highest level of data measurement is the ratio level. This is quantitative. Here we have a constant interval, but it has a zero starting point. Like the case of degree centigrade, Celsius, it doesn't have an absolute zero starting point. But if you want to convert degree centigrade to an absolute temperature, you add plus 273, convert it to Kelvin. And Kelvin scale is absolute. Degree centigrade is not absolute. In the same way, 40 kilogram and 20 kilogram, 20 kg is half of 40 kg. If you also look at the height of people, this person whose height is 1.6 meters and another person whose height is 0.8 meters, 0.8 meters will be halfway the height of 1.6 meters. The reason is that the measurement of height in meters has an absolute zero starting point. So please, when you collect data, you ask yourself, these data I've collected, at what level are the data? Are they nominal? Are they ordinal? Are they interval or are they ratio? The highest is ratio. And once you can collect data at ratio level, it encompasses all the other levels of data measurement. So we want to briefly look at data analysis. Now, data analysis should be considered during the conception of the study. In other words, how you analyze the data you collect, you think about it at the beginning. It's not after you have finished collecting the data, you start running around for the analysis or how to analyze it. And there are two types of analysis. We have descriptive and we have inferential statistics. And so these are the statistics. You have descriptive, organizing, summarizing, and describing data, and have inferential, generalizing, and leading to significance, that's hypothesis testing, or correlational statistics, which looks at relationships. Correlation is actually a type of descriptive statistics. But if you are now determining significance, then it becomes inferential. Now, this is just for you to be guided. I've just tried to put the steps in hypothesis testing. Maybe I'll just run through it, but I don't want to discourage us by this, because at this level, I wouldn't expect you to be going through this step by step in doing the calculation. But it's good for you to note some of the highlights here. So I just run through them, and at the end, I tell you what you're expected to really know as practitioners, or what you can use as practitioners, not merely students. Now, in hypothesis testing, we have what is called a null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is a no difference hypothesis. And then the alternative hypothesis is, for instance, you see here, mu1 is equal to mu2. That's null, no difference. Now, the alternative, mu1 is not equal to mu2. If they are not equal, mu1 can be greater than mu2, or mu2 can be greater than mu1. That's not equal. And if you say not equal, it means that it can be either greater or less. So when it is either greater or less, that is two-tailed. But if you know that mu1 is greater than mu2, that is one-tailed. And then the level of significance alpha, which translates to what we call rejection region. If it is one-tailed, your alpha is 0.05, which is 5%. And if it is two-tailed, your alpha will be, you now do alpha over 2, which will be 0.25. 0.025. You divide the 0.05 into 2. And the next thing is to select the test statistics. That is the equation. Now, there are different equations, maybe the z-score test, the student t-test, the chi-square test, the ANOVA. All these are the possible tests we use in statistics. Then you compute the numerical value. That is, you solve the equation. And then you compare calculated value with the tabular value. All these test statistics, they have tabular values. Now, the decision says if the absolute or calculated value, that's irrespective of the sign, or what they call modulus, is greater than the tabular value, you reject the null hypothesis. Otherwise, you fail to reject or do not reject. And of course, if there is equality, it says you run the experiment again, get more sample size, and do the test again. Now, what I want you to take home here is when there's a significant difference, we say that P is less than 0.05. When there is no significant difference, we say that P is greater than 0.05. And what is the importance of this? If you compare the efficacy of two products and you say there is no significant difference, what it means is that the two products are comparable in terms of their efficacy. And if the two products are comparable, it means you can use either of them. So that will guide you in the decision. And if you find out there's a significant difference, it means that one does not compare with the standard. And so if it doesn't compare with the standard, it means you can't use it. And so if you want to introduce a new product into the formulary, you're comparing the new product with standard products, and you find out that there's significant difference in their efficacy. Should you still include it? The answer is no. You can only include them if there's no significant difference, meaning that they are interchangeable. So for us, the important thing is not really calculating the values, but is also interpreting the values, because we have computer programs or packages that can help you to do the calculation. Good thing, they can also help you to say whether they are significant or not. But that does not help you, that doesn't tell you the interpretation when it comes to the research question we are trying to answer. That is still where your knowledge as a professional will come into play. So these are some of the tests: Z-score test for large sample, comparing two populations, student t-test, binary one-way ANOVA when the means are more than two, chi-square test, which is both parametric and non-parametric. You have correlation and regression analysis. We say correlation is descriptive. How much linear is the relationship between two variables? And regression is inferential. How good is a linear model that will explain your data? And so that is a summary of the test, but I can tell you, you won't be going beyond comparing two means or three means. So you should just focus your mind on student t-test and one-way analysis of variance ANOVA. And that will just be enough. And I said, statistical packages are available to aid analysis. So, and that is the good news. I don't expect you to start writing equations and start computing anything, but I expect you to know how to use these packages. And these packages are user-friendly. And when you get the packages, you read the tutorial. They have tutorials. From the tutorials, they will tell you how to use them. And some suggesting that let us get these to practice and practice with them. And do not be in a hurry to become a champion. Yeah, because the more you do it, the better you can do it. You just to start from somewhere. So there are two packages I'm recommending. GraphPad Instant. Trial version is available. One good thing about GraphPad is that it's a small package. So you can copy it on a flash. Trial version is available. You can start with it, and then you can use it to determine means, to compute basic statistics. You can also use it to do student t-test. You can use it to do chi-square. You can use it to do ANOVA and things like that. So rather than racking your brain on how to do the statistics, is it not better to just get these packages and read the manual and see how you can use them to analyze the kind of data you'll be getting? I don't do calculation. I use simple packages like this, and I will encourage you to do the same. Now, let's spend the few minutes we have left on manuscript writing. Now, good manuscript or project writing demands more than just high quality research. Yes, after you have collected the data, analyzed the data, then that's not the end. It requires accurate and concise communication of findings, conclusions, and appealing presentation. Yes, you can do a good work, but how do you communicate it to the management? How do you communicate it to the outside world? How do you communicate it to colleagues? By way of the way you present it. Now, adherence to extensive journal guidelines or institutional requirements for project. If you're submitting your manuscript for a journal, please look at the guideline. If you're writing a protocol for ethical approval, there will be a guideline. Look at the guideline. If you're submitting a manuscript for publication to Nigerian Journal of Pharmacy or West African Postgraduate College Journal, they all have guidelines. Any journal has guidelines to authors. So first of all, you have to get those guidelines, read them, understand them, and format whatever data, the work you have to suit their guidelines. Now, the next thing is you have to look at your language, because we believe we'll be writing manuscripts in English. So we should be conversant with the language. I know many of us have some hiccups when it comes to English language, writing good English. So some people are better in terms of proficiency. So when you write, you can give to somebody to help you correct some of the grammatical errors. So it is suggested that we use simple, active, and passive sentences. Yes, active sentences where possible are better than passive sentences. Then you have to have a logical flow. And after you've prepared the document, you need to format it. If you don't know how to format a document, please give it to a good typist to help you to format. Sometimes we prepare documents, but because the formatting is poor, the document is no more attractive, it's no more appealing. Nobody may want to look at it. So it's always good. But we can learn these things, how to format documents. But if you can't use the battle with it, you can seek help. So this is the structure of manuscript writing. You have the title, authors, and affiliation. The authors, the people who contributed to the manuscript, and the affiliations, where do they work? The next thing you want to see after that, you have the abstract, then introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion and recommendations, references, and then the appendix. So we just pick them and do a little work on each one. The title, it should be clear, concise, and without period at the end. We don't put a period, full stop at the end of a title, please note that. And if you are using uppercase, make sure you are using uppercase all through. And otherwise, use the normal case. First letter, uppercase, others, lowercase. Now, the abstract is an informative summary of the work that enables the reader to go further or to give up. The abstract is the first thing anybody sees, but it is the last thing to be done. So we put it on the first page. And I said it is informative summary. Good one for that matter. Now, abstract may be structured into, you have background statement, 1 or 2 sentences that justify the work. Objectives, they must be clear, specific, and measurable. In active reported speech, objectives are written in reported speech. That is, the objectives of the study were to. That's what I mean. Methods, here you specify how data were gathered and analyzed. Key results, highlight important findings as facts and figures. Conclusion should be based on the objectives of the study. Then some journals may want keywords which are used for indexing. Again, keywords are arranged alphabetically. Once you pick the keywords, you have to arrange them alphabetically. The reason is if somebody wants to search for this article, what can the person type in to be able to locate this, your article or your study? Now, the introduction should contain background on the work, general literature review, specific literature review, and that's the previous studies on the title or topic, and it will end with general and specific objectives. The methods are written in past tenses, so reported speech. And when you're writing the method, you arrange it like this. You have the design, the setting, sample of population, inclusion, exclusion criteria, data collection instrument and administration, data analysis, then ethical approval. Those will form the subheadings for writing the methods. Then the results. Results presentation, we have to be very careful. Results are written in past tenses. Results should be presented scientifically. What do I mean? All results are first summarized in sentences or text. Then details may be presented in different forms, such as graphs, tables, charts, pie chart, bar chart. But duplication is not allowed. That means after you have said all the results in sentences, you don't go and draw a table and use the table to draw a chart or a graph. But what we normally do is to present a summary in sentences, then you can present the details in tables or figures. When tables are used, each table must have a descriptive title. That's it. Every table should have a title that describes the content. If, for instance, you have table 1, demographic characteristics of the subjects or participants. Demographics, then you're now having something like a disease condition, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, duration of disease, complex. So those ones are not demographic, which means that you need to change the title of your table to table, say 3.1, demographic and clinical characteristics. That's what we mean by descriptive title. The title should describe the contents of the table. Now, tables should not be crowded or ruled with vertical and horizontal lines. For research, we don't rule tables with vertical and horizontal lines. Only 2 lines are needed. Maybe the one that on the title and the one that tells you that the table has ended. So no grid lines. However, when you're preparing the table, you might use lines, grid lines, to align the cells. But at the end, if you're using the SAT table to be able to align the cells, at the end, you select the table and say hide grid lines. When you hide the grid lines, all those lines will disappear. You can now draw the 2 lines on the table. Now, I've also said that the table should not be crowded. If you have too many things in a table, you can break it. Table 2, demographic and clinical characteristics continue. So you break it. And table format may be portrait or landscape. So you look at the information you're presenting. Would they be better in portrait format or would they be better in landscape format? Discussion. Now, the purpose of discussion is not to repeat the results, as many students wrongly do. For new or inexperienced writers, they don't know the difference between results and discussion. Now, results present the facts and figures. Discussion interprets the results. For instance, if you say 50% of the respondents, that is results. When you are now discussing, the 50% will translate to half. No more figures, but you use words. Also, discussion compares with other studies. And because you're comparing with other studies, you must cite references. And if you have so many things to talk about under discussion, you don't just pick each result and start discussing. What you can do, you look at the objectives. So discussion should be focused on the objectives of the study. That will guide you. And you should highlight some unanswered questions or direction for future research. You know, what your study could not do. And if one is to do another study, what are some problems or gaps you think your study has not been able to address, which future studies should attempt to address. And finally, it should contain a section on limitations of the study towards the end. Before the conclusion, you have the limitations of the study you have done. Now, conclusion. Conclusion should not contain, and conclusion should be based on the objectives of the study. So for each objective, a conclusion should be made. So before you write the conclusion from a work, you go back to the specific objectives. What were the objectives of the study? For instance, if you had an objective that says to identify reasons for non-compliance among hypertensive patients. So what reasons have you identified? You have to now state them. That will form part of your conclusion. And conclusion tells how far study objectives have been achieved. Now, recommendations. Scientifically, they are not mandatory, but if you must make recommendations, they should be based on the data you have, not on your professional aspirations, what you want pharmacists to do, or pharmacy profession to be, and so on. If those statements cannot be supported by the data in the work you did, please avoid them. Nobody actually asks you to recommend, but if you must recommend, just be conservative about your recommendations based on the work you have done. After that, we have references and appendix at the end. Now it says, make sure all published materials used in the work are inside the work are listed under bibliographical references. So there are two things. All the materials you use for the work, you cite them in the work. Then when you now go to the end, the references at the end, bibliographical references, you list all of them. Also, you cross-check that every reference listed is cited and every reference cited is also listed. Now, referencing style depends on requirements. Two major ones, you have Harvard and Vancouver. In their earlier lecture, we had a third one, APA, but these two are most common. Harvard is the one you have the author's surname and year inside the work, and at the end they are listed alphabetically. Vancouver is the one that uses Arabic numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, consecutively. Then after the references, you have an appendix where you attach your data collection instruments, ethical approval, and so on. So all this can guide you in, trying to write up something. Like they say, we learn to do by doing. All I've just done is to provide a template so that if you want to write or if you pick this template, it can guide you in filling it up. Now, that is what we can take for now. The next contact will be, we will not take specific cases to see how we can illustrate data collection, data analysis, and the report writing. But above all, you also have to start putting your hand on the deck, starting to do a little at your own end and presenting it and giving it to other people like peers. First of all, you start by criticizing yourself, then you give it to your colleagues to criticize you, and then you give it to outsiders and things like that. Nobody was born with all the skills, but as we do it, we acquire more skills, we become more proficient in the process. So I think this what we can take for now. Okay, yeah, I think I've tried to stick within the time boundaries. I was supposed to stop at 4 or thereabout. It's 2 minutes to 4. I think that's good enough. So, moderator, I hand over to you. Thank you all for the audience.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I'm sure you all agree with me that we have had a very stimulating section. The lecture was delivered with so much precision, despite the challenges we had with the network, and with so much simplicity that even if you decide that don't like research, I'm sure you agree with me that you start looking forward to research because so many things were simplified by him that makes it a lot easier for us. Thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate you. I'll just quickly go through what Prof had said, a kind of a summary. I promise you it's not going to be another lecture. But Prof started by telling us that the research method and manuscript writing involves starting from collection of data and data analysis. And he also talked about us focusing on the objective of the study, that it should be clear, it should be specific, it should be measurable, and that the research should be all about we measure in terms of outcome, clinical, economic, humanistic. In our own case, more of clinical and humanistic and economic come into place. Our study design, he mentioned observational studies, interventional studies. Under interventional studies, talking about educational intervention, especially for us in the hospital pharmacies, that this is really a very good one that we should look forward to. Then he also talked about prospective or retrospective studies, which he also said that with all this, that we can even do a combination of any of these, especially observational and interventional. And he also said data collection can be in the world, outpatient, inpatient, and all others. And he said, and also told us that we should consider a unit of data collection, which maybe we won't take directly from the patients or our fellow pharmacists, the medical doctors, nurses, physician sheets, etc. And he also talked about sample populations that it should be defined. Example, whether it's registered pharmacists want to use, or even if it's not defined, if we want to use some other, we should always put it into consideration. And he talked about sample population that we should make sure is a representative of the total population. And this will depend on the sampling method. And he also talked about sample size. He also mentioned inclusion and exclusion criteria that is very important for us to use it to determine the characteristics of our subject. And he went on to talk about probability and non-probability method, where he talked about simple random sampling, systemic random, stratified random, and cluster sample. And other non-probability samples mentioned convenience sampling, purposive, total sampling, and snowball sampling. Also told us that we can use a calculator that you can find online, or we can calculate on our own. And we also looked at how to do data collection, where we identify what and how of the parameters, and that we can apply this to our collection formats. We also talked about scales of data measurement, normal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, with ratio ranking as the highest. Also, data analysis that it will determine what data to collect at the beginning and based on the method of analysis. Hypothesis testing, it told us, very important, especially for us clinicians, so that we can use it to determine if there's any significant difference between what we're doing and already standardized maybe products or values that is out there. And then he rounded up by saying that we should get statistical packages that we can use instead of having to calculate. That it makes things a lot easier for us. And he gave example of GraphPad install and also SPSS statistical package and for social sciences. And he rounded it us by telling us that a good manuscript needs a very good communication method, that we should communicate it in the right way by making sure that we don't just leave our research work and give them and just put it somewhere in one corner. We should make sure that we get it to the management, get it into journals so that people can use it to make evidence-based analysis when it comes to that. And with that, he went on to tell us about all the steps that will be taken. And he told us that every manuscript, the way we write manuscript will be based on the journal guidelines. That's the journal that you want to put your manuscript. And that we should note that if we want to expand on the structure of the manuscript, we should just note about all the things that is needed based on what the manuscript is telling us. Thank you very much, Prof. again, for that beautiful presentation. So we'll just go straight ahead to the question and answer session. We already have some questions in the chat box, but if anybody asks another one that they want to ask, we can unmute. But let me quickly get the ones on the chat box first.
So I want the Prof to stop sharing the screen, sir. So stop sharing. So
okay.
See.
Sir. Prof, sir.
It's okay now. Okay now.
Prof, sir, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I've stopped.
Oh,
okay now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Try to open my chat box. So sorry, I'm trying to open my chat box. I don't know
yes.
why. I don't know what's going on with my chat box. Okay, what's well, my chat box is hanging. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Dr. Bello. Yes. Please, can you help me read some of the, my chat box is not opening. Can you help me read some of the questions while I try to work on it? Dr. Bello, can you hear me? Thank you. Let me log in and out again.
Can somebody else help you from here?
Yes, though I want to log in and out again and see,
okay.
Because it's freezing.
There's a question here. Is there a particular percentage for a response rate? That's one of the questions on the chat.
Okay.
Is there a particular percentage for a response rate?
Well, okay, let me just answer that. The answer is yes and no. You remember I did say that the validity of a sample predicting the population depends on the response of the sample. Okay, so if you have had the sample size, you have worked with that minimum sample size, and then it doesn't mean that you're going to have 100% response rate. But if you're having a response rate that is below half, I think that is a problem, because statistically, when we are taking a decision, we take a decision based on majority. And majority actually means 51% and above. So if you have less than that, then you should start looking at it again. Secondly, there's something we usually omit when we are doing analysis. We only analyze those who responded. Part of analysis should also be to give information about the non-respondents. Can you try to track them? Why did they not respond? Okay. So if you can follow up on non-respondents, you can explore to see that maybe their responses, if they had, would have been similar to what you have among the respondents. So it's always good to ensure that maybe your response rate is above 51%, which means the majority of the people you sampled responded. And secondly, it is scientific to explore non-respondents. Don't just say these people did not respond. Try to follow up on non-respondents. Want to know reasons why they did not respond and possibly what their response could have been. So you add it to your result. Thank you.
Then another question says, does sample size depend on study design? Because some authors put it that 300 is just enough without calculation. I need your comment here, sir. From pharmaceutical.
Yes, it's not as if those people are, if you look at, there's another method of determining sample size, which is based on a table that says if you have this population, this is sample size. If you have that, there's a table, but I just saw that as a lazy approach. It's better for you to look at your own study and calculate the sample size.
Then another one says, is p-value the same as predictive value? And what does it mean? Please shed more light on confidence interval and margin of error.
Oh, okay. Now, p-value, predictive value, confidence interval, and margin of error. Okay. Now, p-value is actually talking about probability that the statement, for instance, if we say that drug A there's no efficacy of drug A and drug B. No significance is greater than 0.05. Now, this 0.05 or 5% is actually alpha. If you draw a normal distribution curve, the rejection region, 5%, it translates to 95% confidence interval and 5% rejection. Put in a simple way, 95% of the time we are saying that there's no significant difference. And 5% of the time we are saying that there may be. So that is a probability that that statement is so. And that's a simple way of saying p-value. P-value tells you about level of significance. It doesn't tell you about predictive value. Prediction is you're using a sample to predict a population. Or, prediction here, unless we are talking about generalization, whether you can extend it to the population. So other factors will actually come. Because if indeed you're saying that there is no significant difference between two drugs, A and B, if there's no significant difference, it means that the drugs are interchangeable. So that one you can explain it. But if you're moving from a sample of a study carried out in, say, University of Benin Teaching Hospital, can we generalize it to all the teaching hospitals? That's a different thing. That's prediction, predictive value. And then confidence interval, I have explained that if you 95% confidence interval, say you are sure 95% of the time, 5% of the time you are not sure. That's like the margin of error in terms of confidence interval. Or if you're taking any measurement, margin of error can be the error in that very measurement. So it depends on whether you're looking at a study or you are just looking at a specific measurement. Okay, and then again, let me also say that for the person who is asking this question, if you get the GraphPad Instant, the package I talked about, you can download it, go to tutorial, you see something on basic statistics. It explains all these things in great detail. So that can actually help you to understand some of these concepts better. Yeah, thank you. Another question
said, when a questionnaire is modified, how can one check for validity?
Yes, if you modify a questionnaire, you can check for validity. You can look face validity and content validity. Yes, on the face value, you can give it to other professionals, experts, to look at it. That is one way. Another way is you can do a pilot testing. Give it to the people that the questionnaire is to be administered. Similar. So they understand the way you had the validity from the point of view of the developers. Also, whether the questionnaire is valid, well, that one they call it more or less internal consistency. That's a statistical method. That statistical method, like using Chrome Alpha, which tells you about the internal consistency of the responses. But the one we can easily do after I have modified the questionnaire is to give it to some experts in that field to cross-check whether the content and the statements, they still are in line. Another thing, that's from the point of view of the development. But also look at it from the point of view of those who are responding. Can you get a sample of those people to look at the questionnaire? Do they understand the content? Okay. Then you do a pilot. If you do a pilot, the result from what you get a pilot, if you can compare with what you get at the end, then you can take it that it is valid.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Kukijam, thank you very much for coming to my. So,
it's Professor Afolabi.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw Dr. Kukijam. Thank you very much.
No.
Yeah,
he's our next resource person. So,
okay.
He could actually have answered these questions.
That shows what we're going to be up for. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, I'm sure she can handle the ones. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Once more.
Yeah.
I have a question of my own, sir.
Please go ahead.
Is there a difference between consecutive and convenient sampling? Because in our research and some people write that part of the sampling method, some will write consecutive, some will write convenient sampling, and they seem to be saying the same thing when they are trying to break it down. So I don't know, is there any clear difference, sir, between consecutive and convenient sampling?
Consecutive is a type of convenience sampling. And what makes it consecutive is that if you're taking patients that visit a facility, you take them as they come. That's consecutive. Yeah. So it's a type of convenience sampling.
Okay, so they can be used interchangeably, sir?
No, consecutive tells you the order. Okay. But what I'm saying that all consecutive sampling or samples are convenience, but not all convenience samples are consecutive. Okay. Yes. So if you are not sure, you can simply say convenience. That covers all.
Wow. Thank you very much. So do we still have more questions? Anybody?
Yes, Dr. Kingsley Amibo, the hand is up.
Okay.
Yeah, Chairman.
So please, Okay, can we unmute you? Okay, yeah, unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Awole. I want to begin by commending Prof for a very beautiful presentation. And I'm really glad that we are actually, the objectives set at the beginning are being fulfilled in terms of educating our members. So, Prof, we're very grateful to you. 2 points really. One, I don't quite remember you talking about limitations of study. Maybe I omitted that part. I don't quite remember mentioning that about the need for us to include that in our final report. I don't know whether you mentioned it or not, but I didn't quite hear it. And then secondly, I have a real life experience I want to share and probably get some advice from you. During my master's degree, my project, my master's degree was in public health. And then because of writing the project, my methodology involved use of questionnaires, and second part was observational study. So I've since finished that program, but in order to get the result published, I've been having challenges with how to report the details of the result writing and discussion. That has stopped or slowed the publication of that work since 2015. So the question now is, where you have we did a project and then you have maybe involving a questionnaire and an observational study, how do you write the report and how do you interpret that report during the discussion? But like I said, that's what I've been delaying the publication of my master's project. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, let me start with your first limitations. I did say that at the end of discussion, you should have a section called limitation before conclusion. So that was taken care of. And well, your question on your own specific experience, you did an observational study and you also did, what did you say? You used questionnaire?
Questionnaire, yes.
So the questionnaire could have been, the design could have been observational. And I believe it was a cross-sectional study. You collected the data once from the respondents.
Yes.
It's observational in the sense that after collecting the data, you didn't do any other thing?
No, I didn't.
So it's a cross-sectional observational study. That's the design of what you did. Okay. And, that's why they talk about collaboration in research. Yes, you may have done the work, collected the data, and you're having difficulty in writing it. You can collaborate with some other people, and being part of the manuscript writing is a contribution. I'm sure if you had given that to maybe an experienced researcher, it would have helped you to get it out. Then it would become a joint publication. So nobody has it all. Even the analysis, you can give it to someone else to look at the analysis. So all the same, it's not late. If you turn in what you have, we can use it as a case study in furtherance of the discussions, or if you want to send it privately to any of us or Professor Serum, any other colleague. Yeah, me, right?
Prof, sir.
Yeah, somebody is saying something interesting here. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello,
Go
Prof.
ahead.
Yeah, there is a question in the chat box where somebody is saying that from your lecture.
Okay.
From your lecture, you now know the mistakes made. So he wants to know whether he can redo the studies and publish in journals, that he has already defended the research. maybe used it in some of master's program or something, but that found out that
Yes.
there were quite a lot of mistakes there. Wanted to know whether
Yes.
it can redo the studies all over so that it can publish it in journals.
Definitely. Definitely, you can do that. You can do that. And you also know that the same study, you realize you made a lot of mistakes, could still have been published somewhere, maybe in one local journal. Okay? So the more you know, the better the quality of what you do. And also the quality of the journals where you can publish. So if you look at good journals, anytime you pick the articles, they stand the test of time. But if you look at some of the local journals, you have articles published that are full of errors. So yes, you can redo the work and then send it to a good journal so that 10 years later, when you see it as something you publish in your name, you'll be happy with yourself.
Okay.
Okay, sir. There is also a question here.
Yeah.
Somebody said he asked about correlation between study design and sample size. That I missed your response. Can you just quickly elaborate on that?
Okay.
The correlation between study design and sample size.
Well, let me just be strict on this. When we say study design, that is refers to the design in terms of whether the study is cross-sectional whether it is cross-sectional or it is a cross-sectional or longitudinal. Okay, that is just what a study design is trying to address. Then the other aspect is sample size. The sample size tells you how many of the samples will I use to make it that require a certain minimum sample size. So sample size depends on the population size, depends on the precision of the work you want to do. And also it depends on the possible response rate from the population. So you have to determine a size for the work from a sample. Right. I hope that's fine.
Thank you, sir. Somebody asked, how do you get standard questionnaire?
You get standard questionnaire from the literature. That's why for you to do any work, you have to do extensive literature review. You get from the literature. There's virtually nothing that is new. So every study you want to do would have been done somewhere else. But again, I know the problem may be access. Many of the studies will not indicate the instrument they used in full. So if you look at every study, you have a corresponding author. If you write to the corresponding author asking for the instrument, they will oblige you.
Okay.
But if the instrument is patented, then you have to pay. Yeah, you have to pay.
Okay, sir.
Moderator. Hello, moderator.
Yes.
Let me get back to Prof again. You know, the work I did was supervised by a professor of medicine, and I was just wondering if I have to involve a pharmacist in the publication aspect. I hope they don't regard as plagiarism.
No, that's not plagiarism. But has he? Did you? I mean, if you gave it to him, was he able to? You could have given it to him to review all this.
Publication, the work has already been completed. I'm talking about publication in the journal. That's why I'm having the challenge.
No, what you have completed. Yes, you completed it for purpose of the degree.
Yes.
Okay. Publishing in a journal is another thing.
Okay.
Do you get it?
Will I need the permission?
Yes, somebody else can review.
Will I need a permission?
Yes, you of course you have. Yes, but that is because once you have defended, are you still tied to the legs of your supervisor.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Prof, based on the question on standard questionnaire, please can I quickly ask a question before I read the next one? I did a study, I think it was for my master's, or was it the BAPCP now? And I used Morisky scale.
Yes.
Yeah, but when I wanted to write
Yes.
for a journal, they asked me to ask for permission from Morisky.
Yes.
Yeah, because I use the scale. And I've written several letters, several mails to him. He has not answered. And because of that, the publication, writing of the manuscript has been stalled. Is there anything I can do? Though I didn't use it totally. It was the kind of modified Morisky scale that I used. I didn't use it, but the journal still wants me to get a permission from him, but it's not been responding.
Why they are not responding is because it's a patented instrument. You just go and pay online and you get the response.
Okay, sir. So somebody wants you to expand on Likert scale. Now, because it's used a lot by so many people, that can you just explain? Tell us more about Likert scale.
Oh, okay. Yes, let me say that it is good. Likert scale is a summated rating scale. Okay. Now, rather when you are doing studies that pertain attitude, opinion, satisfaction, and things like that, rather than saying, are you satisfied or not satisfied? Satisfaction doesn't have two extremes of satisfied and not satisfied. Agreeing doesn't have two extremes. Attitude doesn't have two extremes. So if you grade it to say strongly agree, you can give it 5. Agree can be 4. Not sure can be 3. And disagree can be 2. And disagree can be 1.
Just get a short one there.
So we are now trying to rate it. Now, what it means is that when you do summative rating scale or Likert scale, you are actually converting qualitative data into quantitative. And the quantitative data, you call it interval. Interval data are actually quantitative data. And if you have interval data, which are quantitative data, it means you can subject it to parametric statistics. So it will be easy for you to do a student t-test to compare 2 means, or to do analysis of variance if you have more than 2 means. So it actually makes statistical comparison analysis robust for you than when you are just saying yes or no. Is that understood?
I think so. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Then, okay, somebody wants you to throw more light on the type of formula to use for sample size determination, that whether it's based on maybe it's based on the research, on the particular research, or maybe, or I think the person is trying to talk about the study design, whether the type of sample formula differs.
No. Sample size is different. You can use any formula. You can even just do it, do the calculation by yourself. But I'm saying, rather than going through all those rigors of calculation, why don't you use you have sample size calculator? It's standard. Okay, even if you want to use formula, you still need to put in the values and get your computation. So if you are just waiting, trying to calculate those things, nobody gives you a prize because it's not a course of mathematics. So you can as well use programs, okay? That makes life easy. I can tell you, I have helped somebody who did a master's program in a department. And we use packages to run the analysis. And when we finish, the supervisor is saying use formula to do and said that the supervisor wanted him to do the calculations manually the way they were taught in those days. And the guy said, I told the guy, I don't know how to do manual. I don't do manual. I mean, today we have colored television. What am I doing with black and white television? So it's better to learn how to use this package.
Sir, because some protocols, sir.
Yes.
Sometimes some protocols in some research and ethics, they want to see the calculation.
Yes.
I know that we have had to return some protocols in my own because we want to.
That's why you use formula now. Use formula.
And you just write the formula, and then the person will now put the results. They want to see the calculation.
No, you have to put in those values in the formula, and you still use something to calculate it. Are you using your head? You still use maybe scientific calculator to solve it. Okay. Then what you can now do to reassure yourself, if you plug in those values in a program, a package, okay, it gives you a value. You can now use a formula to also calculate and compare.
So the formula you now write.
Yes, you now write the formula for those who are interested in formula. You just write the formula for them.
Okay, sir. Sir, I've heard somewhere that the standard formula for case control studies, intervention studies, that is supposed to be different from the regular cross-sectional studies. I don't know how true is that.
Definitely it is, because for the formula we stated there, we are talking about sample population of 50,000 and so. And when you are doing like case control, yes, you won't have that kind of formula. So what matters is what number do you need to get a difference that is statistically significant? Because usually you may not have, in some cases, you may not have more than 30 patients. Okay. So, and if you don't have more than 30 patients or 25, it's not really a big issue, because the essence of student t-test is that you can handle small sample size. Are you with me?
I'm with you, sir.
So you can use another formula. Or you can also look at some standard publications. Some sample size, you can get your sample size from a standard publication that is similar or comparable.
The study that you are doing.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Somebody wants to know which one is the best, 7-point Likert scale or 5-point Likert scale. I don't know.
I think 5 is better. If you're extending it to 7, you are creating more problems for yourself.
Okay.
Because when you say 5, you can easily say strongly agree, not sure, disagree, and strongly disagree. So when you are introducing 7, how will you put it? Very, very strongly agree, very, very, or very, very, I mean, you just confuse yourself. So I think 5 is just standard. And so that if you use 5 in between, you can take 3 as your neutral point or cutoff point.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody is asking that based on the chairman's case study, that the chairman's case that I mentioned, that can you publish a part of an academic dissertation in another journal? That maybe they will publish a part in one journal, then another part in another journal. Hello, sir. Prof.
Once you have submitted and they have awarded you the degree, I teach again. What is the, no, not the,
Kindly unmute yourself, sir. You are muted.
okay, fine. So I think the important thing is that working with your supervisor who guided you in the course of the work, if you are publishing, so that you don't just publish it as if it was a solo work, but at least courtesy or ethically, let's ensure that your supervisor is part of the publication. Is that okay?
I
Yes, sir.
guess it's okay. Okay. Any other question? That's all I have here. Thank you very much.
But maybe Professor Folabi, since we can ask her if she has something to add to what we are saying. And she's an experienced researcher in this area.
Yeah.
I know she has a session.
Okay.
She has been listening to the question. She can help us to.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yes.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you very much for the stimulating lecture and very comprehensive. On a lighter mood, I could see somebody posted the fact that she said wine gets better with time. And that is what Professor Azuka has demonstrated. So thank you very much for the stimulating presentation.
Thank you.
I just want to add a little point. Somebody was asking about the case study. And I remember when you were given the design, the different types of research design, it wasn't specifically mentioned, even though I know it's included in the longitudinal study. And in our setting, there are situations when we may also need to present a case study. So I think it's also a possibility for us. And one of the occasions when one can quickly start up on a research study and get it published, just like observational, just look at what is happening in your environment or a particular scenario. I remember some time ago, I looked at when we first started the pharmacy shop concept in the teaching hospital here at Ife. I used it as a case study for prescription pharmacy. And I also had it published. So I think case study is another way of getting into research. Thank you once again for the beautiful presentation.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you very much, Ma. We appreciate
It's
you.
my pleasure. Thank you.
We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Dr. Ibrahim,
Yes, Dr. Bugaya.
is Dr. Bello there?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Yeah, please, can you help us give a vote of thanks after the whole presentation and question and answer session?
No problem. When it's time,
Okay, so we now know no more question, right?
Okay, in the absence of further questions and contribution, on behalf of AHAPN National and the Program Planning Committee, we thank our distinguished guest speaker and elder scholar, Professor Asuka Okpara, for his educational, detailed, and impactful lecture. He has opened our eyes to the ABC of research method and manuscript writing. He has stimulated our interest, provided valuable guidance and tools, and broadened our knowledge index. We thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
For our other respected lecturers and professors, either here present, we are so glad to have you on the call with us, and thank you for sharing some of your useful time with us. God bless you. For our dear colleagues and participants, we thank you for your endurance since 9:45 a.m. and commend your burning desire for knowledge and skills to improve your practice. We sincerely believe that you have been upgraded intellectually and enabled to effectively conduct research that will solve problems, advance pharmaceutical practice, and recognition. Thank you. Finally, we thank the HAP Executive Committee under the able leadership of our dear Dr. Kinsley Amibo and the Program Planning Committee led by Dr. Obikoya Oladile for their vision and mission to advance hospital and administrative pharmacy practice in Nigeria. Thank you all and God bless. Over. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bello, for a beautiful presentation, for thanking us. So can we have the chairman of research committee, Dr. Obikoya, rounding up for us?
Yeah.
Well,
Dr.
actually,
Obikoya, unmute yourself.
I've unmuted myself. There's nothing much to say, but just to apologize for any small inconveniences that we've suffered in the course of the sessions. You know, we've just started, and I know very sure as time goes on, we'll improve and remove all those lapses. And it is our charge to our members that subsequently they should join, because this is something that others are yearning for, that they are paying for, and we are giving it free. And we can assure them that this is not going to just be one session. It will be a series that will continue. And we want to appreciate our national chairman for giving us the opportunity to put this together. And we know they can do more. So I want to thank everybody that has participated in this particular session. And we are looking forward to the next session. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you all.
That.
Thank you. Bye. See you next week.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the nice outing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.